Welcome back, Super Stock Bros. It's your boy Bub, and today we're doing a special episode. It's a podcast episode with our boys here. I'll introduce them: Senor Jeff and Spicy Tofu, and we're going to be covering topics like Peloton, Uber, Airbnb, Lyft, how you can make money not only in stocks but in your day to day. Let's get this party going. All right, welcome back, Super Stock Bros. So, this is a channel where you can invest in stocks. We give you advice. Ace, he gives you the road to a milli challenge, and he's out today, but I'm joined by two close friends here, Senor Jeff and Spicy Tofu. Senor Jeff, you want to just say a little about yourself? Maybe you're invested in Uber, Lyft. You've maybe worked for one of them as maybe even a driver in the past. A lot of people invest in these companies because of the fact that, one, they employ people, two, they make a lot of money. They have a stock, but getting to the ground level, like, these companies are big because there is a reason they're big. What's your history? What's your past with the company I just named? And maybe you just tell us about yourself.
Yeah. So, Uber, actually, I used to drive for Uber for a hot minute back in like December 2017. I just found myself a little bored and wanted some extra cash. I had a car, so drove on the side, but it wasn't a viable, I guess, side job or part-time career, just because you're not driving every day, you're not really making money. So did it for a month, didn't like it, but some people who do it for their their career or like their job, they make some decent money. So and I'm a I wouldn't say a loyal Uber user, but it's the one app I use when I need to get around the city.
So wait, let's dive into that for a bit, actually, and then we'll jump over to you, Spicy Tofu, on that. So you were a driver.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, why didn't it appeal to you? You had a car. A lot of people are, first of all, trying to get a car to even become an Uber driver. Is it worth it to them? So, like, the viewers that are watching, like, is it worth their time, or is it like the payoff wasn't well in your city, or what? Why try it and then kind of give up on it like a month later?
Yeah, well, like I said, if you're not doing it full time, it's kind of hard to make money. You have to be pretty adamant at just kind of getting out on the road and having your schedule or whatever. But I was kind of doing it. I had a full-time job, and I just kind of thought I'd make some extra money. So I'd go out a couple hours at a time. But those 2 hours, a lot of times you're kind of waiting around for your next ride. So if you're doing it 8 hours, 9 hours a day in like the rush hour morning time, or at night, people are going home from work, or even like pre-pandemic, your club or bar hours, so your midnight to 3 o'clock is a big time as well. And I wasn't really going out during those times, so it wasn't really a big moneymaker for me. And just I wasn't a fan of just driving around picking people up. Usually they were drunk or just, I don't know. It was just a weird experience for me. So
The peak hours, right? Was like, that's when the Uber drivers can make money, but that's also the peak of like
hours. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, when you have the craziest amount of like customers that you don't want in your car as well.
Exactly.
But you're an avid user of the app. You pretty much use it wherever you want to get to, right?
I'm a walker. Like, I love walking. I'll even walk like an hour to the store to get something or whatever. I just love walking, especially in Vancouver. Just moved out here 6 months ago, and it's a very walkable city. It's beautiful. You got the water, beaches. It's not a lot of big main roads, so it's a nice place to walk. So I just try to get outside and just walk everywhere. So I'll use an Uber when it's late and just tired, or I'm drunk and just need something fast to get home. But if I do use like a ride hailing service, I'll use Uber over Lyft.
Now, what's interesting is Uber is relatively new to Vancouver. They like got in there recently. Before, it was like a smaller private company that had similar product, but for like taxis, I think. I think that's the story there in Vancouver.
Yeah, I know cabs were a big thing, but I know they just got a Uber and Lyft maybe the past 2 years. So yeah, it's very recent.
So what about you, Spicy Tofu? Big fan of Uber, or same thing? Like, you left Toronto, you're in Seattle now, I believe, and you use it or don't use it, and as well as, do you know people who work as an Uber driver?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Uber. I think I've always been quite conscious of how that app became the viral, or the word even Uber is now a part of our vocabulary now, right? I still remember, this is years ago, but maybe a lot of people didn't know, but Uber Eats actually came from Toronto. And I remember going to a startup sort of a setting, and I think the head of product or business development from Uber was in Toronto and talking about like, hey, we're launching Uber Eats, and we're about to sign this big contract. Hush, hush, don't tell anyone about it. And I think a year later, we got McDonald's as part of Uber Eats, and that was pretty neat. And also, I'm quite fascinated about the whole concept of Uber too, because if you think about all these mobile apps we use today, Uber is one of those apps that totally took advantage of the fact that we have this little GPS on everyone's phone, and we can able to engage drivers as opposed to waiting or randomly finding a yellow taxi or orange taxi somewhere to hail it down, right? We just wait, see a car that drives by, we hail them down. Where really you take advantage of the fact that everyone has a phone, and everyone else, the driver could have a phone, so you connect them together. So I really like the idea, and I read quite a lot into the founder and how they came up with it, and yeah, a big fan of it. I think similar to Jeff, I love to walk around too. Like, I think living on West Coast, you don't really get that harsh winter. You want to take a car all the time. So I use Uber when when it's a long drive or I need to get something really quickly. A lot of companies actually now partnering up with Uber, so there's part of the kind of like company expense where you can some credits to use Uber and pool sharing, to promote just sharing ride as opposed to everyone commute and pay for parking and things like that. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Uber.
Yeah, some quick stats. So personally for me, Uber, I haven't used it in over a year just because I used it mainly to get around from like weekend parties from one place to another around the city. But quick stats here. This is a January 2020 article written for people who want to be an Uber driver. On average, an Uber partner earns about 25 an hour or 50,000 per year if you work 40 hours a week, but it's possible to make even more. That's with, let's not forget about Uber Eats, because a lot of people, for example, Ace also orders a lot of Uber Eats. He's like a big fan of Uber Eats. They're doing a lot of promotions on that, but that's because they have a lot of competitors, right? Like Lyft. So if we want to dive over to the stock here in the past year, it has gone up. Let's see here. It's just full year. It's gone up about 35%, right? Not bad for a return on one stock for a year. If like you were, let's just say you were all in here, you'd make 46% from May of 15th of 2020 to now. You'd have a pretty good return if you're an investor. Now, if you're an Uber driver and an investor, usually there's a philosophy, right? And you may know this, Senor Jeff, but you should be investing in what you use all the time, right? So if you use Uber all the time, why don't you just invest in the company, right? And you'd probably make a good return on your income here investing in this company. Personally, for me, I'm not invested, but I do see this company maybe growing like when the pandemic or lockdowns are pretty much over in the States and in North America. Maybe, I don't know if they're expanding to Europe, but do you guys know anything about that? Do you think they have a good future? What do you think, Senor Jefe? Is there like a lot of competition, or do you think that Uber is a thing of it's not going to do well going forward? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think Uber is going to bounce back to pre-pandemic levels, especially like you mentioned earlier with Uber Eats. I mean, Uber Eats is insane right now. I work at a restaurant. We have Uber Eats, we have DoorDash, we have Skip the Dishes. Uber Eats is by far the most popular option we use for delivery, especially with restaurants being closed or restrictions and stuff. So food delivery has been an insane option during the pandemic, and I only see it at least maintaining its current trajectory, if not increasing over the next year and into the future. So I mean, I see Uber as a buy now since it's fairly low. And Lyft, I feel like Lyft, it's just kind of its younger cousin, just kind of just doing its thing. I mean, it doesn't have a food delivery option. So if you're going to pick one or the other, I'd definitely go with Uber because it has more options and it's obviously the bigger service.
What do you think, Mr. Tofu?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned about stocks at Uber. So Uber is actually a stock that the third stock I ever bought in my whole life, right before the pandemic started. And I think I put in a couple $1,000s and I watched it crash to nothing, right after March. And I decided to get scared and sell all of it and never, look at it again. Should have kept it. But yeah, like, that kind of maybe just show you how much I trusted Uber, right? In that sense. Well, who would have predicted a pandemic, for example? But I definitely think Uber it's inevitable, right? This kind of platform, it's continued to grow. I think their challenge is obviously this old industry of the the taxi industry, right? That's a very much mature monopoly in city to city, country to country, region to region. So I think that's the biggest blocker per se. And also marketplaces where other competitors basically copycats of Uber. It's not
Yeah.
rocket science to create this. So that's where you have cousins like like Lyft, and you have in China's Didi, and you got a bunch of other startup coming up. But the technology itself, I think it's not going to go away. I do see, and this is probably not a near future, but maybe I would say midterm, the whole autonomous car industry is going to be picking up faster and faster. So how would that play out with Uber in the future will be interesting, with
Right.
Tesla and other kind of car automotive companies that are essentially making people to not even owning cars, but leasing cars and, by the hour. So there's less of that car ownership, because really fundamentally, I think what Uber does is you're taking advantage of a car that you're not using, or the time they're not
Right.
really using, and you in exchange you help someone to deliver food or deliver someone to a destination. So I think that might change with more advanced technology, but that's still in the future.
So what has the better growth potential, you think, Lyft or Uber? Because I hear Uber Eats. I never heard of Lyft Eats or anything. Like, how are they competing? Because if you're looking at this chart, they're almost identical. Even
Yeah.
Lyft has had a bigger gain, but for how
That's
long, I'm not
that's a
sure.
great question, actually. It's funny. I moved out here in Seattle, and the first thing everyone keep telling me, it's like, don't use Uber, use Lyft, it's cheaper. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that, because Lyft wasn't really an option, back in Toronto at the time. And I think when it launched, it wasn't really much of a difference.
Okay.
But here, for some reason, actually, Lyft is come off pricing a little bit cheaper, like not much, like 5%, less than 5%, I would say. But I'm just used to the Uber, and I always used it, so I like that. And it's just a little bit more options.
Right.
I actually debated when I remember buying, like I was like, should I buy Uber or should I buy Lyft as a stock? And I look at Uber because it just have a greater spectrum of portfolio. And Lyft, in my opinion, I think they have a better image because of that. Uber had that scandal with the CEO and all that kind of things like that. I think that's what kind of maybe draw a little bit bad press per se. But I think Lyft really need to step up to really compete with Uber. I think right now it's more of a just, to some maybe to some of the American audience, they think Lyft is a little bit more like, we're all more nice, and they got that pink sign that comes up, in the car, so it looks a little bit more professional or fun per se. But
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, they're the same thing, right? It gets you to places,
Right.
and if you have more offers like food and things like that, that's everything is extra, right? So that's
Okay.
kind of how I
Yeah.
look the difference between the two.
Yeah. Final thoughts on that, Senor Jefe?
Yeah, like Spicy Tofu mentioned the scandal with Uber. I mean, definitely kind of a bad PR move there. And yeah, I guess I see Uber as, the bigger company, but also when you're bigger, you have, more targets on your back. You have more to lose. And I mean, I think this all, their stock price is going to depend, I think, mainly on this bill they're trying to pass in the US. Because right now, their drivers for Uber are not considered employees. They're considered self-contracted drivers. So Uber has no obligation to kind of pay them any, vacation pay, or there's no rights. They're not held liable for these drivers. So I know, Biden is trying to pass this bill that makes Uber obligated for their drivers and their employees. So if that gets passed, we might see a dip in their stocks, and we'll see how that affects them. But I mean, this has been put off for a number of years now. So I don't see it coming into fruition anytime soon. But if that does happen, I'll be interested to see what happens to their stock.
Yeah. My final thoughts on this is Spicy Tofu made some good points there about this fact. If they get into self-driving, they will disrupt the fact that if they need even people to deliver things. I mean, would then the restaurants take out their food and put it inside the car, and then the car drives the food over to the target location? That's an interesting thing. And then, like, you have cars picking up other people. The cars that would be on the road I don't know if they would be self-driving cars like a Tesla or a Lucid Motor or whatever's on the road at that time, the special EV car. And the cars are owned then by the people who own cars. So if you own a car, you're the one who's making money on the self-driving vehicle. It's actually an interesting industry that may get disrupted. It may take the driver out of the seat literally and make it like a full service end to end. You don't have to talk to someone, you don't have to tip them. You're just tipping the company or the owner of the car maybe at that point. So that's an interesting. That's food for thought for the future. I think maybe we'll have to come back and talk about this in the next a year or two and see what Uber and Lyft do, because it's like drivers are temporary. We only need you for now, maybe. So let's keep that in mind. I mean, it's interesting. You can do it now for a good job. You can buy the company now, but I think it's okay. I think it's a good gig. If we're talking about gigs today, it's a good gig company. So let's move on to another gig. I think Peloton. You guys are familiar with Peloton. They had a recent also scandal, but they seem to have bounced back from it. Let's pull out Peloton. Let's just quickly go back to just chatting between us. So Peloton, what I know it as is like, you know, these super bikes that are like basically a laptop on a bike, and there are a lot of virtual instructors. The stock went sky high during the pandemic, basically because all the Orange Theory, these big gyms were all closed. Cyclists had to cycle from home and they couldn't be with their group or their instructor. So they had an uptick in instructors. I recently learned there's a lot of instructors who make quite a bit of coin on Peloton. So they have instructor base, they have a user base, and they've grown. And now there's worries about, will Peloton fall with the pandemic coming to an end and people getting vaccines? Is this a good company to invest in? And what's your thoughts on Peloton? What do you think, Senor Jefe?
Well, I think this is going to be the most interesting company we talk about today, just because, you know, during, 2020, during the pandemic, as you mentioned, like we saw a crazy increase in sales for Peloton. They're doing extremely well, but with the opening of all these gyms coming forward, and as we near the end of the pandemic, I feel like it's going to take a bite out of Peloton sales. People are going to start wanting to go back to the gym, meet people in person, have that kind of social interaction that they're not really getting. It's more of a one-way stream on Peloton. You get to interact, you don't get to interact with the instructors, they interact with you. So people who are big kind of gym hardos, they're going to want to go back to the gyms. But I do see Peloton still maintaining relevance, but we're not going to see the likes of 2020 sales or revenue moving forward. But I think they'll still do well. Yeah.
What do you think about that, Tofu?
I second that very well, actually. It's funny you brought up Peloton. I actually didn't realize this is a hot topic. Just before the pandemic, actually, this is kind of an interesting story. I'll make it quick, but actually a very good colleague, a friend of mine, almost a mentor in many ways, she decided to quit her, very good job and open up her spin gym, right? Literally, she's been planning this with her husband for the past, I think, 6 or 7 years. And she's one of those person that she loves to do spin, and she being, lease a place and rent it out. She ended up quitting her job. Then pandemic happens. Crazy, right? Think about it. She just paid for lease. No one's going to the gym. Everything shut down. She invested her whole life saving into this. And then at the same time, Peloton becomes such a hot topic. Like literally, I'm on a call with some coworkers and things like that. Everyone kept talking about how much like they're the number 260 waiting list for today for the Peloton. Like it's completely sold out. I hear people talk about it and all that stuff. I'm like, whoa, what is this, right? I mean, and I look at the price. I'm like, oh, this is not a cheap device, but I get it. It's a weekly, it's a monthly payment. It's like going to a fancy gym. You got that whole experience and things like that. And I totally get that. And spin class, to be honest, I hate doing cardio myself, but I there's a couple of times I've been to these spin classes. I really, the instructor, that feedback and that interaction, it really pushes me to work out and really push it to the next level. So I enjoy that very much. And I guess, and never try a Peloton myself, but I imagine it has some of that interaction. But I think it's it's only one way, right? So, and it's funny. Literally last week I was looking at some used stuff, and a lot of people are actually selling their Peloton on OfferUp and like kind of Craigslist secondhand platforms. And at the same time, and I also hear actually two friends of mine, they both just order a Peloton too. So it's a mixed thing. I'm just like, okay, that's what you want to do, and that's what you want to invest in, and also people are selling them online. So I personally, I don't think that's going to be a very much sustainable growth in like how crazy it is with this pandemic. But I think this whole virtual interactive, as we get into more of like this augmented reality kind of stuff in the future, this how we do gym, that might change the game. And maybe that's the direction Peloton is taking to. But I think, in the immediate, like I personally go to the gym because, and if I want to be trained by a personal trainer, I want that interaction, right? Like I think a telescreen is just not going to do it for me. But anyways, that's kind of my mixed emotion or feeling about that.
What do you think about that, Jefe? Did he raise any points that you wanted to expand on there?
Yeah, I mean, he kind of just reiterated what I said, and I agree with everything, Spicy Tofu said. I feel like it's just people are going to be having a lot of screen fatigue. People are going to be working from home a lot more, even on a part-time basis. Last thing they want to do is go back on another screen to work out virtually. Some people are into that. It's more of a convenience factor, right? They don't have to get up, get changed, go to the gym, shower, come home, right? Like wait in line for the squat rack. Like I get it. Like going to the gym sometimes can be a pain. So it's a convenience factor, but at the same time, people are just dying for some interaction, some like face-to-face in-person interaction. And like, like your friend Spicy Tofu, who opened up a spin studio, those things were crazy before the pandemic. Like for the most part, girls are like 95% of the consumer base. Like every single girl I knew, going on dates with them or like coworkers, whatever it was, like coworkers, they were going to spin studios on a weekly basis. They loved it. Even if it's like $30-$40 a session, they don't care. Like it was their one way to like, exactly. They're fun places. They're fun environments. They like blast top 40 dance music. The lights are low. You're just getting good sweat on. So I see Peloton doing decent. People are still going to subscribe to the service because it is $50 a month. So it is cheaper than most gyms. But people are going to want that face-to-face interaction. So I see people going to the gym as a more than staying with the Peloton monthly service.
Yeah. So this article I pulled up doesn't really speak to the expansion, but I could see why Peloton was a big deal in the past year. One, if we're talking about gig jobs, this does employ instructors, and an instructor, listen to this or read this, it's not officially disclosing salaries, but it is believed that instructors can make up to $500 to $750 per class. With 10 to 15 classes taught in a week, an instructor can rake in 585 100,000, like 585 G's annually, right? So 52 weeks a year, 15 classes. These instructors are able to reach more. And that was always the issue with instructors, right? They have their gym, they have this max capacity. Sometimes they turn away people. Sometimes they don't have enough people if you're in a tough location to get to. But through Peloton, you're able to get a vast number of people who, I think what we're going to see after the pandemic or after everyone's get vaccines, let's just say like 2 years, 3 years from now, you'll see a lot of people who are like, I enjoyed actually working out from home. And then you'll have the people who are like, yes, I'm going into the gym because that's the only way I will work out. So you're going to get this divergence of two classes, right, of minds. Like some people may actually keep their Peloton at home for rainy days and then go into the gym because of this like kind of payment structure that they have, which is like, I think it was, if you get the bike for $2,245, you pay $58 a month. And then some people are okay with that monthly payment and then may also have a gym. That's just like your upper like gym freak person, right? I think they'll do that. But then you'll have this, Peloton will probably come in with like new packages and new ways to make you keep your Peloton at home, right? As well as offer you some things. I mean, recently they did take a hit on their stock, and that's because they had that issue with like some safety issue in the back of the bike.
No, it was the treadmill, because they have treadmills now. It was the Tread Plus. They had an issue, but I'll give Peloton credit. They owned up to it. They didn't try to beat around the bush and say, it was someone else's fault. They're like, hey, we messed up. It was a manufacturing error. They did a big recall. People can get another free treadmill. They just send it in, whatever. So, I mean, I feel like that is good PR. So I think that's not going to hurt Peloton in the short term. It definitely hit their stock, but I think people are going to be faithful, that people can relate to companies who are honest and they're not going to try to scam people. So,
but the thing is, like,
a good move.
It was actually debatable. Like I was reading two things. Senor Hefe, I was reading two things. I was reading that one, they actually waited to see what like kind of the consumers were going to react. Like they did a reaction to the reaction of certain consumers, because the actual thing, I was following the stock actually when it was at 122. When the actual news broke out, it did dip like 15%. And then when they didn't act, it actually dropped again because of their sale. And then because they brought to light the fact that they finally acted. So we have two camps of like people who assess the situation. They didn't act fast enough, and that's why they took that extra hit. But as in you see in like the recent couple of days, they are recovering from that second fall, because they did offer like a full refund or something. But yeah, that's debatable on whether they acted fast enough. But I guess in some aspects, if some people are saying they did, then they did. But the market cap right now, they're saying is this company's worth $28.8 billion. Do you think they're going to keep that market cap? Because the past 6 months, they did reach a high of $167. So that's like almost like double this market cap. Is it going to still be worth that much based on what we've said? Or do you think this is an investment that you would pass on at this point and wait for it to get lower? What do you think?
I
Stock-wise,
mean,
stock-wise.
stock
If you want to be an
stock-wise,
instructor, you can make money.
I think stock-wise and consumer-wise. I mean, I wouldn't buy one because I like going to the gym myself. I like doing, class workouts. It's more
Yeah.
competitive. It's more of a challenge. You have that,
Right.
that kind of sense of competitiveness against the people in your class. I wouldn't buy it as a consumer, and I probably wouldn't invest in them just because I don't see it bringing big gains. You might see 5%, maybe 10% tops over the next year. Like I said, I mean, I just kind of dial back a bit. I compare Peloton to Nintendo Switch. During the pandemic, everyone bought a Switch because everyone was stuck inside. So Nintendo saw crazy sales. I mean, I used to work for Nintendo. I'm not going to disclose any crazy, exact figures, but they had a flagship year in 2020 because everyone bought a Switch.
Yeah.
Now that everyone has a Switch, they're not going to see a lot of sales now because they've kind of plateaued. They've hit most of their prospective consumers. So I think
Right.
Peloton's the same thing. Everyone's bought a Peloton, and now that gyms are opening up, all those Peloton users, as Spicy Tofu mentioned, are selling them, trying to get rid of their Peloton because they want
Right.
to go back to the gym, or they're just canceling their subscription, which is $50 a month, which is the thing that's gonna help grow Peloton as a business. Is their subscriptions, not necessarily the bikes. So
Right.
I wouldn't want to invest in Peloton right now.
Okay, yeah, I think it's a pretty dangerous stock myself. It's something that you got to wait and see, right? Because now it's like management has to step up and be strategic. Like you said, if they've made their sales, how are they going to make additional sales? Is it going to be through word of mouth from existing Peloton owners? It may be Spicy Tofu's right. People are just like selling their thing and they're going to head back out for the summer, enjoy stuff, and then maybe reconsider in the winter of getting another one. Like it could be, like you said, like they got one, they're like, meh, it was a fad, maybe not a fad, to be determined. I think. What is that? What you think too, Spicy Tofu?
Yeah, that's how I generally feel. I think the stock is obviously crazy during the pandemic, and I think because of the pandemic, people even heard about Peloton, right? I think a lot of people never heard of that until
Yeah.
during this time. But I do think this is just my opinion because I think I'm very much like an extrovert, and I love going to the gym because I do interact with people, especially taking these classes. That's just me. But I think sometimes, and now I just remember the two people that just bought pounds, and they're both very much introverted. And I feel like maybe there's tapping into that market of people are afraid of going to the gym and being in tight clothing in front of men or other people and things like that. So there will be some of that are tapping into that people want to stay at home and still have that kind of gym experience, but not being I don't know, being
Yeah.
judged in a gym and things. So then maybe that's something that they're tapping into and will continue to tap into. So anyways, that's just my opinion on it. Yeah.
Oh, well, they definitely got Beyonce backing them up, right? She's like their PR celebrity spokes. So we'll see what happens. They seem like
Did you
they have
really?
deep pockets. I think so,
Wow.
right? Right?
Okay.
I swear it was like
Wow. I mean, if they
Beyonce.
got Beyonce, good for them.
Yeah.
Let's
Then you
look it
That's
buy
up.
it.
huge.
Then we buy the stock. If got Beyonce, we'll buy it.
Yeah, Beyonce and Peloton
They got
team
my
up on
money.
unprecedented partnership. Look at that.
Mm.
So you got Beyonce power on there, man. Like, I mean, these guys have
Well,
deep
man.
pockets. They're hiring the most expensive like celebrities to
Yeah,
market
man.
them.
Imagine if Beyonce, I'm not sure if they do this, but imagine Beyonce ran a Peloton class.
Oh gosh.
That thing would
If
blow
she
up. You'd
Booked.
get
was
like
featured,
100,000 users per class. That would be insane.
Yeah.
Because right now, I know that the top spin instructors on Peloton are getting upwards of 20,000 users per class. That's insane.
Yeah.
yeah, you have a brother in fitness, right? What's his take on Peloton? Have you heard anything from him?
He's more kind of just like weights and stuff. He's not really big into cardio. I haven't really heard
Yeah.
much of it. He's more into like personal training. So yeah, hasn't really learned
Yeah,
much about that.
they got Beyonce here wearing the gear. She says Peloton and I both understand how the power of music can help uplift and inspire those on their fitness journey. So maybe they have plans to have celebrities. Look at this, Beyonce full body strength with Robin live class. What
So I
is up
guess they
with
just
that?
have Beyonce kind of soundtracks, Beyonce inspired
Yes,
That
Beyonce
teams.
makes
boot
sense.
camp.
Okay.
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 With Jeff.
So
It's not Beyonce.
they're getting the royalties. Okay, I see why Beyonce got her face on there. Okay.
Yeah, she's
J-
making money off this for sure. She probably has a lot of stocks in it as well.
yeah. Jay-Z is
She's
just
probably an
cashing in the
investor.
back.
He's like, good job,
he's
honey.
riding his Sea-Doo and his bucket hat, just taking all the money.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our next and last featured stock or company, and that's the big Airbnb.
Woohoo.
Airbnb. I'm sure we've all used this a few times in our life, traveling, maybe a bachelor party, who knows? But Airbnb definitely was quiet, I'd say, in 2020. I know maybe a few handful of people that actually still booked an Airbnb over a hotel. If you guys are not aware of what Airbnb, Air Bed and Breakfast is what it was actually called. And then they just went with, just call us Airbnb. So let's just pull it up here. Airbnb. The stock past year, it actually IPO'd back in December. So it's a relatively new stock to the market. They say it was overvalued when it came on, but hey, it still shot up during that run up from December to Feb. It shot up 52%. And it looks like it has fell back to earth. And actually, a lot of people that I talked to today were considering today, as in May 14th, 2021, I've considered maybe starting a position. What's your take, Senor Jefe, on Airbnb? Have you used it? Would you invest in this company? And what do you see in the future for Airbnb?
I am a firm believer in Airbnb. Obviously, I mean, during the pandemic, it took a massive hit, which is why it led to going public, obviously, back on December 9th. So they needed money. I mean, they were dying. There was no one traveling. There was obviously people couldn't travel. So obviously it took a hit. Same with hotels and resorts. The whole travel industry took a hit. But now that things are opening up, I see Airbnb as a big buy option. It's supposed to see 40% revenue increase over the next year. And I can see it getting back to 2020 numbers easily by the end of fiscal 2021. And doing some research back at my old job, people who want to start traveling post-pandemic or even the tail end of the pandemic, they want to go to more rural countryside, destinations. They want to get your cabins or your cottages. They don't want the big city destinations. They want something a little quieter, more family friendly, something that's safer, whether it be, safer because they were outside the city, or safer just because it's more hygienic because you're not in a big hotel or a resort. So I see Airbnb as a great option to buy. And right now, as you can see over the past day, it's gone up like 8 points. So definitely buying now for Airbnb.
The issue, it has fallen actually a lot in the past month because of what's going on in the stock market. So it has fallen 24%. So I've got my eye on it. I'm not an investor, but let's go over to Mr. Spicy Tofu. What's your take? Are you an investor, and where do you see it going?
Oh yeah, huge investor. I think I bought Airbnb blind. Like, I don't care if it's $1,000 right now, I'm buying it. And I literally, I think as soon as he IPO'd, I didn't even check the price. I just said, like, I got a couple $1,000s. I'm putting all in there. I don't even know if I'm making or losing money at this point. I actually have quite a big history and a big passion about Airbnb. I actually found their first pitch deck when they first pitched it in front of the VCs, and it's actually online. Anyone could download it. But I base all my pitch deck based on that. It's really good. And what's interesting, maybe most people don't know, the CEO, Brian Chesky, like he's a, he's not an old guy, 39 years old. And there was a famous quote they said when they first pitched the idea Airbnb to all the VCs. The VC says, "Your idea is terrible. You will never make this out of it, but we will invest in you because we believe you can do anything." And that's why. And that really kind of solidified a company and its direction. And there's a couple good podcasts where he was a guest speaker on many different shows, and you can really tell he's really thinking about not just the company but the employees that he's working for. I think he sent this great letter during this pandemic where they really have to lay off many people just to make the boat floating, right? Even with the IPO, or this is actually just before IPO because they had to delay that, but really he has this vision for the people and thinking a long term. And one thing I think, maybe just me being philosophical about this, but I really think this whole real estate problem that we're living in this generation, it's not going to be solved. And I actually believe in the future, in a really very near future, I don't think we'll be having any homeowners anymore. I think there's a whole decentralizing owning home and living in different places. That will be the new norm. I think our kids, our grandkids will be living in a place where we don't really necessarily own homes, but we own parts of the home through this kind of redistributing and not just using for traveling, but that's just how we live. And that's kind of where I see that the future of Airbnb will be, and that's inevitable, right? And it's a market that hasn't even been tapped. It's funny. I don't know. Maybe I always like to listen from old people. Every time I'm in a restaurant, I always, I don't know, if I hear some people talking in the background, I'm always conscious of that. But I've actually caught this quite a lot, where I spend a lot of time listening to the older generations, of the boomers, the people in their 60s now, retirement. They keep talking about like they want to retire, but they don't know what to do with their home. They don't know what to do with it. And they just keep saying like, hey, let's Airbnb this out to whomever. They're like, we don't even care because the mortgage is paid for. They barely pay any on the taxes. They just want someone to be there once in a while to take care of it. So I think that market will blow up. I think there's going to be companies that will be helping you manage Airbnb, even getting bigger and bigger, and even more of that. Maybe Airbnb will build their own hotel. They'll become the Hilton. They will do not just vacations, but office space too, and all these kind of things that I think they haven't even scratched the surface. In my opinion, the biggest and the most oldest market in the world ever, which is real estate, right? That's what they own, and that's the technology and disruption they're changing.
That's interesting about them. Like, so they're going to start owning homes, or you're going to decentralize homes. I haven't heard much about this topic, but I'm looking forward to maybe like getting into another conversation with you about it. Because I thought people are trying to own homes now. Like that's the race now, and that's why housing prices have gone up sky high. I mean, that's not the only reason in low interest rates and such, but like, isn't the goal to own a home? And then the fact that if you own a home, maybe you can Airbnb it, and then you can work kind of like that's another way of making money. Like that's part of another gig. So like kind of the theme of what we've been talking about today is Uber. We've got Peloton, we've got Airbnb. So if you're a homeowner, you can rent part of your home. I remember we went to Spain, and then one part of the home was for guests, and the other guy lived in the other part of the house, and he was just making 500 USD per like weekend, just kind of like sitting in the corner of his house while the other part of his house was being rented by like an American or a Canadian or whoever's traveling. So your house is actually making you money. So I thought the goal would be like you'd want to own a home as fast as possible to be able to Airbnb it out.
I think for you make a really good point, because I think right now we're at a time where we see the home rising so high, and I think that's one of the key reasons why everyone's also chasing that, because we don't want to miss the boat, right? There's that kind of that FOMO, and also like, hey, if I don't invest a home now, a year from now it's going to even be more expensive. So there's that kind of that snowball effect. I think maybe for me, I'm thinking of like in the future where like essentially home is almost unaffordable. Like unless you have like tons of money saved out from your parents, passed down to you, or inherited, or you won the lottery, whatever it is, it's very difficult to own a home, and I think this whole industry might be disrupted. I mean, history has always, this whole real estate, from every single country, every single religion back in the days, we've always redistributed the wealth and the homing and homes. So I think that will happen, and I think maybe they will use a platform like Airbnb in the future to do it. I don't know. I mean, this is just me spitballing, but I truly believe this Airbnb platform will be beyond our imagination how we use it today, and right now it's limited to maybe just rental homes.
Let's just run through some stats. Like that's an interesting point. So it says here Barcelona, Amsterdam, Paris, Venice, San Francisco, amongst others, have enacted regulations specifically targeted at short-term rental market at Airbnb for Airbnb properties, or and that could affect perhaps the revenue Airbnb generates. However, like I continue reading here, and let me just show you a statistic. 2020 might have been bad, right, for Airbnb, but read this. In 2020, there were 193 million bookings on Airbnb, a 41% contraction on the 272 in 2019. Obviously, the pandemic had an effect here, but it's still higher than it was in 2018.
Yes.
So if you look at some
growing.
stats here, it's still like people are still chugging along. They don't care. Like, so, and now with like vaccines and people starting to get more confident and getting out there and possibly, renting their spaces for Airbnb, you could see that jump, because look at this revenue from, let's just say 2017, 2.6 billion. And they made 3.6 billion the year after that, 4.7. And then the pandemic hit, they're back to 3.6. So yeah, they pulled back a bit, but I'm curious to see what 2021 numbers are, and then 2022, because it is growing.
They'll be double.
Check out the users.
They'll be double or triple. I'm telling you right now, I just booked something on Airbnb, and there's very difficult to get spots right now. Like it is going like fully booked. Like everyone is booking vacations. I would not be surprised if they doubled the revenue next year for this year actually. compared to last year, and they will continue to do that year over year for the next decade or two.
Shoot, man, I better get some investment going in that company. But I'm worried about the regulation and stuff like that. I don't know how regulated a government can make
Yeah.
Airbnb, like the same way they had on Uber. What's your take on that of Senor Hefe and then Tofu? What if regulation comes down hard on Airbnbs? Because in Toronto, they started coming down hard. Like you have to be a long-term rental person. You can't do like a weekend here and there. You have to list for 3 months at a time now, for example, in Toronto.
Yeah, well, first off, I agree with Spicy Tofu. I mean, I think Airbnb is just scratching the surface. Obviously, it's a new company when it comes to the stock market that just went public back in 2020. So, I mean, look at their stock price. It was at 210, 213 in January, February. That was their high. So, I mean, that's during a pandemic. Imagine where that's going to go in 2022 when it's gaining momentum and it's opening up, and maybe they have resorts or hotels, or maybe they buy an island. It's an Airbnb island and it's like a crazy resort. Who knows? Like, the sky's the limit for this company. I have no doubt in my mind that this company is going to double their revenue from 2020 to 2021. Maybe not this year. Sorry. Maybe 2022 we'll see a double, just because this year is still kind of COVID. But I mean, get in now on Airbnb. It's a new stock, and we've seen it go to 212, which means, starting at 141. Is that what it started off as? So,
it's actually, if you held it the whole, like from when it opened till now, you're only up 1%. But if you sold at the high, you would have made 52% on your investment, and that would have only been 60 days later. So,
and you're still in a pandemic. So
yeah, the thing is, like, I think we got a taste of what it could get to. However, like, there's a debate right now that this part was a lot of like overbuying and crazy stock market euphoria, because now there's like a bit of a correction here, but you got a taste of what it could get to. And for me, I think I got excited today when I saw the price. I just did not have the cash on hand to get into it, but it is a crazy good company at a good price. And if you look at their competitors, you have Expedia Group, Trivago, HomeAway, VRBO. I've only used Expedia. I haven't used any of these. I haven't used Flipkey, House Trip Viator. I haven't used bookings.com. I don't even know or trust any of these. And I'm not saying they're bad companies. It's just Airbnb has more of that appeal to me personally. And so does Expedia, because I guess through my bank, they have like a deal. So I've used that. But I also heard, and you can probably find an article on this, during the pandemic of 2020, Airbnb was out just buying out all their rivals while everyone else was, like bleeding cash. Airbnb is like, all right, I'll just buy you out. I'll buy you out. So like, I think they took a lot of these like small startups and like took their best programmers and their listings and their user base. So they had a lot of growth during that time. So remaining is just booking.com and Expedia, and then you have Airbnb. So slim competition for a large company like Airbnb.
Well, it's funny right now because I'm looking at Expedia's last year in the market. Last May, it was at 66 points. Today at 171. And it's been a steady incline since last May. So that's interesting to see. It hasn't done too poorly over the pandemic. So, I mean, there is a market for these, this booking websites. So again, that's why I say Airbnb, it's buy now. It's going to go crazy.
Let's check it out. So let's do Expedia versus Airbnb. If you look at the chart here, they kind of follow each other here. I mean, Airbnb took a major hit in the last couple of last month or two. I'm not quite clear on why that might be. It could be that missed revenue, but I think because of all their investment and what they're doing, it could be because of that. So we'll keep an eye on it. And I did see, other than renting your place, Airbnb had like some sort of gig thing going on for like being a tour guide. I remember someone in Spain offered us a tour guide from the Airbnb. Like they showed us around. I don't know. I'm not sure if they wanted a tip or anything, but they had that feature, and I think they've recently taken it off. However, I don't think it stops people from being an Airbnb specialist. For some people, that could be also a good gig. Have you heard of that before, guys? What's your take on that?
I know exactly what you're talking about, because there was a bartender in Toronto that him and I kind of got along, and he was telling me about how he's quitting his really good job just to do this kind of gig, where it's basically taking around, people visiting town and going to all these kind of speakeasy bars around the town and showing them the whole experience. I think there's some challenges with that, especially during pandemic, where you basically are not allowed to do that. And I think that might be the reason they've taken it down, or just so experimenting with that. But I think it's interesting because Airbnb actually don't really advertise them as a vacation rental thing. They're more about the experience you have when you're visiting a place. And I think that they emphasize that quite well, very much in their front. So it's not so much that you're just renting a place to stay or live. It's more of like you're going to that crazy little villa in the middle of nowhere, or like this boathouse in the middle of the ocean, because you want to go there to experience it, right? I suppose you just want a place to live, and I think that's something they're marketing for, and I think that's what I want to get to.
Yeah, is that what you get the brand of Airbnbs for the experience, right? That's what they say, host and experience.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's a good. Anything else you want to add there, Senor Jefe, on Airbnb? Seems like you have more of a passion for this company. Just, you seem like you threw out some statistics there. Is there anything else that you think is on the cusp of Airbnb? Is there something interesting that they're offering or we should know about?
I'm not sure about like new offerings and stuff, but yeah, I mean, people do go on there for the experience because you have like these one of a kind places or houses or whatever you're in. Like, I know a girl who quit her, or sorry, she's kind of a part-time nurse right now, but she's bought like a camper van and is traveling around and just kind of visiting random Airbnbs. And she was at one a week or two ago. It was like a tree house, this little like mini tree house, like luxury tree house, but things like that, like you can't get on like your Expedia.ca. Those are like massive resorts and like Hilton and like the Marriotts and Radissons and stuff like that, right?
Exactly.
Those are your big hotel resorts, where Airbnb is more boutique. They're more one of a kind, unique experiences, which people want. People, business class is obviously going to stay at the hotels when they go away for business or because they're used to that. But families or young couples with disposable income, they'll pay premium dollar to go to these tree houses or little huts on the ocean, or because they're near a cool surfing spot or things like that. People want that experience, which is why these hosting things are going to be a big thing as well coming in the future.
All right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. I think we need a meme for that. What do we feel? We need a good meme for that.
Yeah, meme it up. What do we want
here? It's let's do this one. Let's do the Super Mario. Let's just get that. Oh, anyways, let's be like Mario. Take your money, invest in some Airbnb, get some coin. Oh, that's a different stock. We'll talk about that another time.
That's a whole nother day.
It's a whole nother topic. Okay, so I think this was very insightful. I think whoever like kind of watches this recap will get an overview of the best kind of gig economy stocks to invest in. I like the perspectives you guys had today. Any final words you want to say before we close this thing off? Senor Jeff, it was great to have you today. It was great to have your insights. I know you worked at these kind of like startup companies, and you got some insights there, as well as the on-hand experience, literally driving an Uber, and you have like that. I get that good analogy with Nintendo and Peloton. I never really put that together. It's like when you buy one, why would you buy another one? I think you're buying with the classes or whatever hell's add-ons they have, but that was interesting.
Well, the thing with Nintendo and Peloton, it was like I didn't even think about it until I started doing research on Peloton. But the thing with Nintendo is that you're always going to buy a game because new games come out. With Peloton, it's a subscription where people don't have to subscribe. They can still use it without the classes, right? They can just do it on their own time as a normal stationary bike. So that's the difference. I think Peloton isn't the best stock to buy. I think Uber, out of Uber and Lyft, Uber is your option. And then Airbnb, like we just mentioned, like I think that's a big buy right now.
Uber, Peloton, Airbnb. I hear you. You know what? Just a word of advice. We're not financial advisors. We're not here to give you financial advice. We're just telling you what's out there. Be like this mini putter here. You gotta take it slow with your investment. You don't want to dive right in. You want to just putt in. You gotta go slow, invest slow. Anyways, we're getting silly here. Spicy Tofu, you want to say anything before we close this thing off?
Yeah, buy Airbnb. I'm telling you.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
That's right. All right, boys. It was nice chatting with you. All the best. Have a good weekend, and let's meet up again next time, and let's do this again. I enjoyed our chat. And Super Stock Bros, if you haven't yet, like, subscribe, and share. Peace out.
See you guys.
Peace.